Welcome to the All of You podcast, where we believe healthy relationships are created by growing individually and pursuing a healthy relationship with yourself.
So let's take a deep breath. Settle in and grow together. I don't know what is going on, but we are on a let's do episodes I swore I would never do kick lately.
Yeah. And it's not even like on purpose at all. We're not out of content ideas. We just posted a story of topics from the audience, what they'd want us to cover. And people had all kinds of suggestions. We have some really good topics that are actually, frankly, a lot easier than today.
Yeah, and that I'm actually really excited about. I loved what a few people suggested.
But to be honest, the way that we pick the topic isn't what we most are excited about always. It's an intuition. Where are we feeling called to go?
We could actually do an entire episode on the word calling and what a calling is. I've been feeling so many callings lately, and I'm having a lot of big feelings about them, but we'll save that for another episode as well.
Yeah, so today we're talking about faith.
Yeah.
And God. And we've been asked multiple times.
Yeah, we've had a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but I would say like around 10 people have slid into the DMs asking, are you Christian?
Mm-hmm.
And that is I'm about to say that's a tricky and sometimes triggering question for me to answer. And already in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh shoot, I hope I'm not hurting my parents when they hear this. But it is.
Well, because we get so caught up on these labels. So as we get into this conversation, I want to preface, I always feel like the need to caveat, but I don't know what Christian means anymore. So the label is really difficult to fall under because I don't know what I no longer know what a Christian means. So when I'm asked, are we Christian? I almost get this, like, I don't know how to answer. So what I do is if the person seems like they understand the type of Christian that I am, then I will say yes.
That takes me back actually to, I think it was actually the night we met, or it could have been the next day. And I asked you something along the lines of like what you believed in. And you gave a 5-minute long mini episode, I'll call it, that was like windy, swirly, twirly, that at the end of it,
Past
I was
the swirly, twirly gumdrops.
Yeah. In the, what is it?
Candy cane forest.
Candy cane forest, yeah. And by the end of it, it was like, well, he believes something. And honestly, I'm kind of similar vibe.
Yeah. You were and that's what I would say out of all the things that drew our romantic relationship closer, it was our faith and our faith journeys and we talked about God probably more than we talked about any other subject when we were dating. And neither of us were really involved in church at the time or any type of, we were on the outside of any type of faith community. We were lone rangers in our faith, and we found each other and we're like, oh, you're similar to me, where you're doubting and you're struggling with these doubts and you're wrestling with your faith, but you also have an upbringing. So we should probably just get into it. I think we should share our faith stories.
Yeah, and they're very long. Well, because like all of you know, we both can talk, but I'll try to keep it like as high level as I can.
This episode might be 3 hours. Sorry.
Might have a part A, B, C, and D. No, hopefully not. But all of that to say, I'll kick it off. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was not a pastor, but he was a Bible teacher. He taught at almost every church we ever went to, whether that was in youth group, Bible studies, or like actual like night classes at the church. I would actually say my dad is somewhat of a biblical scholar without a degree.
He's a pastor. He's the closest thing you can get to a pastor without maybe having the title as pastor. But to me, he's like
more.
a pastor.
I would actually say he's more knowledgeable than the average pastor.
Yeah, and just dedicated, and he teaches multiple Bible studies. I'd call your dad a pastor. I think that gives people the kind of understanding of your upbringing.
Yeah,
you're a PK.
Yeah, if you don't know what that means, it's like slang for pastor's kid. And I loved growing up in the church, and it was a big youth group kid until I wasn't. Dun dun dun. And I think a big shift happened when I was in youth group. I've kind of talked a little bit before about my brother on the podcast. We're 18 months apart. We were incredibly close. And I would actually say I was a bit enmeshed with my brother, meaning I was so close with him that it was almost like I didn't see where he ended and I began. Like we were at like a package deal. And I think that was partially because I looked up to him so much and he looked out for me so much.
But I also think that's normal for that age. And you're not quite your fully independent self yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't say that in like a weird way,
just
kind of to paint the picture of the relationship. And when we went to the same youth group, and I think my brother was in like 8th grade, I was in 7th grade at the time. My brother started getting into a little bit of trouble. Nothing crazy, but was, hanging out with kids that were like quote unquote kind of like the bad crowd and getting into minor bouts of trouble. And when I went to youth group, I had leaders and kids in the youth group, but where I was mostly impacted was the leaders would say really unkind things about my brother to me and be like, where's your brother? Like, is he off doing this and that? Or where's your brother? Is he hanging out with, so-and-so? And it was very apparent that my brother was not accepted there. And because they saw him as a bad kid. And I was so close with my brother, I began to feel that, oh, I'm not accepted here. And I also will admit I very much have a loyalty trigger. So if you say something negative about someone I love, I have to work really hard to not get triggered. And that's, I think that situation is largely where that wound came from. And so I stopped going to youth group because I didn't feel accepted there. And that narrative of not feeling accepted at church has been an ongoing theme my entire life, feeling like I've always been really close to God. I've always talked to God. I've always had a relationship with God. Church has always been a place I don't feel welcomed. And actually, I won't say always. There was another church that I went to later in high school, actually after my brother passed, that was very loving and accepting, and the youth pastor there played a really big role in my life. But I would say I've had a battle a lot of my life feeling accepted at church, and to the point where if someone like speaks Christianese, and that's like, I don't know if you grew up in the church, you know what that means, but it's like basically like where people like speak kind of Christian-y, but it feels fake and phony. I get triggered and I almost can't be around them. And that's my work that I have to work on. I have a lot of healing that I have to do. But I would say because of my wounds from my church, and I would actually call it like religious trauma of not feeling accepted, I don't like claiming that I'm a Christian because I don't want to associate with those that hurt me. And I know that so many people have been hurt by the church and don't find it to be a place where they feel accepted. I know that I am not alone. And then I know that so many people have been hurt by the church and don't feel like it's a place where they're accepted, that I don't want people to feel that way around me. And so I'm overly cautious about that because I I my beliefs, and we'll go into this probably further in the episode, is the strongest calling that I feel in my life is to love. And to me, that means accepting people no matter where they're at. And I think that's even reflected in the name of our podcast. Like, all of you is a synonym for acceptance. And so I hesitate to talk about faith. I hesitate to talk about religion and God because I never want to feel like I'm judging someone. And I'm really just, I don't like to trigger people in that way because I know my triggers around church and the non-acceptance that I felt there. So that's my little like kind of sum of my story. There's a lot more I could go into. I'll also say that I went to a Christian college. That was a very tumultuous time with my faith, wrestled a lot there. And ultimately, I've on and off been in church Bible studies my whole life, I would say. But I've always been just deeply, deeply wrestling with a lot of things. And where I sit now is just incredibly open-minded. And that was something that I was really taught to be wrong, that there are things that you need to believe and that are law. And if you don't believe them, that is bad. And I've had to do a lot of work to deprogram a lot of the things that I was taught in order to be more open-minded. And that's been one of the coolest journeys I've personally been on, is unprogramming a lot of the things that I was taught when I was younger in order to figure out what I actually do believe. And that being able to be a little bit more open has actually brought me closer to God than I ever was before. But I'll end with saying, am I a Christian? I don't know. You can decide at the end of the episode. Whether you think I am or not actually doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
And that's a bit about my story. Well, I know your story, but I would like to hear, I think everyone else would like to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not super far off yours, so I think I've shared it a few times, but I'll just give the synopsis. Like, when my dad left when I was around 5 years old, I was not seeing him as often, and my mom took us to church, and that was the first place that I felt really safe, I think. And so it made a big imprint on me. And I said the sinner's prayer, but the guy that said it with me I remember him praying. I don't even remember his name. But he was the pastor at the time, or I think he was a family children's pastor at the time. And I remember him praying with me, and it was, he said it in a way where it was like a grieving that my dad had left the home. And so he was praying that God the Father would be my father. And that left such a big imprint on me at 5 years old. So that stuck with me in some bad ways, and I think some good ways. And so I had this really, really strong tie to Christianity, and that was like my home base, right? Like I could always go back there. So I didn't have the most safe neighborhood. I didn't live the most safe life, but throughout getting in trouble, throughout, all kinds of things, like I could always show up on Sunday and know people, like have like a family there at church. So then when I got in a lot of trouble at 16, I was a huge stoner in early high school and did a ton of drugs and was kind of just all over the place, like a kid with no direction. And then at 16, right before my 16th birthday, I had a youth pastor that so I got grounded. I couldn't hang out with anyone. I couldn't see anyone. It's the first time that my mom actually disciplined me like really, really hardcore. And I was in a lot of trouble, so much so that if I wanted to keep doing the things that I was doing, I was probably going to have to run away. And I was contemplating running away. I think I ran out. I left. I remember getting out of her car at one point in the middle of like a busy road and just walking off like a different direction. I was like, I'm never going home. I just had so many disruptions happening in my home life because of my own issues and my own struggles. And she was just not going to let me go off this path, but she couldn't really physically restrain me. I was too big at this point. So she got my youth pastor involved, and he picked me up every day from summer school over the course of the summer that I turned 16. And his investment in me in that summer like flipped me around. Because I think I talked about this in the father wound episode. When you're so young without a dad, it was just so much I was so impressionable. And also there is so many aspects of faith that are correct, like the Bible has so much wisdom in it. If you live a certain way according to some of this wisdom, it will greatly improve your life and your relationships. So I then went full evangelical from 16 to like probably 21-ish, 22. So much so that I was a college group pastor. I was teaching every Saturday night. Then at around 24 or 25, I started to deconstruct some things around the church and really think about ways that I thought it negatively impacted me, because there were a lot of ways that the church negatively impacted me. And I believed a lot of things, because it's hard for me to just tell the story and not get into my beliefs, but we'll get into them later. But I started deconstructing, and I was just wrestling with God. I always wanted a close relationship with God, but I really wrestled with evangelical Christianity and a lot of the ways that it negatively impacted me. And then I went through a divorce in late 20s, early 30s. It was a big deconstruction period in my life, where this feeling like the church kind of sold me on this path that didn't go well, right? Like getting married young, just figure it out. And there was a lot of relationship tools I was lacking. So then I was upset, and I was bitter at the church, and I was bitter at Christianity. I was kind of bitter at God. And then when we met, I was 35, and I had already done a lot of deconstruction, and I was saying I would say I was repairing my relationship with God. Also, I'd been to therapy and done some work on my childhood trauma, and that brought me closer to God. And then when we started healing at a faster rate together and trying to love each other correctly, God started to reveal himself in a new way to me in our relationship. And that now I'm at the point similar to you where like I don't really care if I'm considered Christian or not Christian. I don't even really care about the facts of the faith. And now we can spin off into probably what we believe a little bit more.
AKA the fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we can talk about faith. Now we can I think we just needed to share a little bit of our background so people understand And I would say that, well, I'll speak for myself. I would say for me that without the church, without my youth pastor, I don't know where I'd be. I my life, I guess, could have taken a turn where it would have ended up better, but I actually believe that it probably would have been a lot worse. So the church was a safe place for me, and there was a lot of love and a lot of positive influence that I didn't have at school or in other places. So without the church, I wouldn't even be close to this version of me. Like and also the encouragement to go inward and go to the depths of my heart, to search my heart. Like there was a lot of good that I got from youth group, and then I took that on to teaching, and I the only reason I ever stopped teaching the Bible was because I didn't feel good enough. I hadn't dealt with enough inside, to really feel like, I'd say it was like imposter syndrome almost. So, but there was so much good I got from leaning into my faith in my later teen years, that it grew a depth to my personality, to my character, that wouldn't be there if I didn't ever go that far inward.
Yeah, I would say it's something that I've had to learn to hold in both hands, as we say. So much good. So much good came from my Christian upbringing. I think I saw that the most in the season after I lost my brother. That's when I really clung to God to get me through that season. That was just horrendous and traumatic, and it really did get me through that season, and God has played a pivotal role in my life. But I just don't know if I credit the church as there were a few youth pastors that did make a difference in my life for sure, but I think I credit God. But I think I do have a little bit of resentment that I still hold because of how unaccepted I felt there. And I've had to do a lot of work. I've had to do work to heal the shame I carried around sex because of what I learned growing up in the church. I've um I've watched friends that are LGBTQ not feel accepted and had to love them through that. I felt a lot of judgment growing up in the church. And I think also, we didn't meet until I was 32 and got married. I was 35. And the church was really not an accepting place to be single. There's a lot of subconscious kind of subliminal messaging of there's something wrong with you if you're single as a woman at that age. And so I think for so long I have a lot of pain associated with my experience going to church. I also have a lot of good. And so I really, really do have to hold it in both hands and go, God has always been good.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I hate that I'm about to say this, but I do have to like go back to that. But the church is a lot of broken people, and they're often trying to do their best and they miss a lot. And I have had to and am still learning to hold that in both hands.
Yeah, my grandpa used to say that if you want to find the perfect church, don't go, because then it won't be perfect anymore. Like everyone's broken, so like if there is the perfect church, probably no one goes there, because people, as soon as people show up, they're gonna start interacting with each other and negatively impacting each other. We do negatively impact each other as humans, especially when we start to use religion as a tool to shame others or outcast others, or we have clicky vibes. Humans have clicky vibes. We like to view other people as the other, and there's bad and good, and we can't hold nuance. We can't hold it in both hands. So we end up shaming people for things we think is sin. It's just perception. It's just people. We all make mistakes. But I wanted to say something in the beginning of this episode. This episode isn't about you should believe in God or you shouldn't believe in God. We're sharing this because people have asked us about our faith, and we felt called to give some context to what we believe. So people, I guess, have been curious about our faith. So we wanted to share this. Like, this is our faith, but this is in no way. This episode's not a personal growth episode. This episode's not like you should follow our faith journey or believe this or believe that. This isn't an evangelistic episode. This is definitely just
that's very opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, this is where we're at, and we're gonna share our story.
Well, and I think I would also caveat, this is where we're currently at. Next week, we might have another hot take.
Yeah.
Like, this is a stamp in time, as really all of our episodes are.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that a year from now, I've evolved in what I believe and what I think and who I am, and that I've grown.
Yeah.
But this is like the current timestamp of.
Yep. And sharing this stuff is huge because when I was in a period of deconstructing my faith, and so my church believed a certain genre of Christianity, and there are certain things were right, certain things were wrong. And as soon as I left that church to go kind of pursue my own faith journey, they didn't like that so much, I don't think. Certain people thought I walked away from God or whatever. They made up in their heads whatever they made up, right? Different people thought different things, I'm sure, about me. And in a lot of ways, I did walk away from some things that were right at different times. But when you do that, when I did that and I was on my own and trying to discover my own faith, I sought podcasts, and there was a lot of people sharing their faith journey that was similar to mine that really helped me resonate and make me feel not alone. So that's why I think that's a big point in why we're doing this as well, is just if you are like us, maybe this might resonate. And if you're not, maybe you're curious about it. I enjoy listening to people's faith journey because it's a big part of who we are. Like, what do you believe your purpose is in this world? What do you believe about God? And I spent some time as agnostic almost. Like, I just got to a point where I was like, I don't know if you can really prove God is real or not, And now I think we get into what we believe now.
Mm-hmm.
So we kicked off on this healing journey, started meditating, and I think that my faith has come back to me mostly through meditation. I was a huge prayer advocate growing up. I've prayed all throughout my life. I've kept journals, prayer journals, and I've always spoken to God pretty honestly, and not pretty, I would say radically. I probably speak to God more honestly than a lot of people feel comfortable doing. And I've just always had that radical honesty with God. I hope everyone feels that comfortable, but I just let him see everything, right? I can't hide from God. I've always known that. So when I'm talking to God, I'm naked. There's nothing to hide. And it's great. But at some point through meditation, I felt God knocking on my door and kind of calling. I was releasing all my inhibitions. Is that what you'd call it? I was releasing all my...
I don't know. I just think of that Natasha Bedingfield song. Release your inhibitions, feel the rain on your skin. But I don't know if that context was true or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I release my will, and I release my thoughts. I release everything. And I felt at one point God knocking on the door, and it's not like audible. It's not like I hear God audibly, but I can like feel a thought pattern happening in my brain that doesn't feel like me. It feels like a source. It feels a little bit more. And it's when I get to a complete state of releasing myself. Like I've released who I am. I have no ego. I have no identity really outside of just being in that moment. I'm just being. I'm a human being in this moment, and I'm not doing anything. I'm not thinking anything. I'm really just releasing it all to God. And then I feel God go, like a little nudge, like, and it's there are verses in the Bible about this, like the still small whisper, be still and know that I am God. There are so many verses letting you believe that other people have felt this in history as well. And whether you believe the Bible is true or not, it doesn't really matter to me. Like, I don't even care if the Bible's real or not. None of that matters anymore to me at all. And I know people spend so much time arguing over it, and it's
I
just
know so many Christians that would be absolutely triggered by that sentence.
that I don't care if the Bible's real or not.
Yeah.
But so I'll just say this. I do believe this. This is a conviction that I believe. I believe some of us humans who are Christians have made the Bible more important than God.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have made the Bible more important than God, because they say the word in the beginning, the word was God. And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe God is owning the Bible and saying the Bible's true, whatever. Sure, that's fine. But check your heart. Check your heart. If God spoke to you in your inner voice, and he was speaking and knocking on your door, and the voice said, the translation of the Bible that you're reading isn't really right, or this book shouldn't have been in the Bible. Like, when all the books of the Bible were written, they weren't written as a part of one book. Somebody later put all these books together, So I'm not saying the Bible's not right. I'm not saying the Bible is right. I'm saying, is it more important to you that the Bible is right, or is it more important to you that you walk in faith with God? Like, where's your heart, And I got to a point where I just realized the semantics, whether heaven and hell is real, whether the Bible is correct and these stories are real or not, doesn't really matter in my lifetime. I'm years and thousands of years later, after these stories, I have to live my life. And where are the people at? And spending my time arguing whether this verse is right or not. And also, something that gets me is God continuing to speak? Is God continuing? Because I have a hard time believing that God wrote the Bible and just stopped. A lot of people will say it's in Revelation where it's like no one should add to this book. Like no one should remove or add to this book. So basically, like they're like, okay, the Bible, that's the last book of the Bible. So the Bible's sealed as the Bible. The Bible's the only holy book that ever exists. But what if God didn't say that and is still speaking? Like, what if no one should add to this book was just for revelation? What if it wasn't for, like, what if God didn't intend the Bible to be what the Bible is?
You just saying that could cause people to go into a frenzy.
Yeah, but what if? Like, just what if?
Right.
Like, just be open for a second, And it's like, if God intended the Bible to be the Bible, fine. Let the Bible be the Bible. Read the Bible. Continue reading the Bible. But if he's speaking in other ways, if he's using your neighbor to speak to you, if he's using
modern day prophets.
Yes.
Yeah.
God wants to use, if God wants to use us, we think God just let those people be used and then they're supposed to be the prophets that speak to us today? Okay, so only pastors of a church are supposed to speak, and they're only supposed to speak using the Bible and their interpretation of the Bible. Like, where's the new language for our evolvement,
Which is exactly why we don't see enough mental health information preached in church.
Yeah.
Because it's not deliberately said in the Bible, but like, why isn't how to heal and or like why, I don't want to say
Well,
that,
it
but like,
is in the Bible though. Like it is in there, but it's not. I just think we're missing some links here, and we're not we have some people have connected the dots. There are some churches that are doing a great job with this, and I've seen them, but there's just not a lot of them. And
so I kind of have this like crazy prediction that I see.
mhm.
And this might be like a more metaphorical for like Southern California in general, but like, what was it back in like the 70s when like Calvary
Chuck
had
Smith.
this, Chuck Smith comes in and that like there's this entire like revolution, harvest crusades, like,
Yeah.
and
Billy
Billy Graham, right? Yeah. They completely flipped the script on
the old church.
Mm-hmm. And kind of created this new wave Christianity. And I think that was needed, beautiful.
That was of
like,
God.
Of
like
God.
God was saying, like, flip the script on this old
100%.
And God loves to flip the script. Like,
yeah.
God sent John the Baptist to flip the script, and then Jesus, like they weren't accepted by the modern church at the time.
But okay, so all of that I agree with you, but
yeah.
What I'm getting at is I think we are at the beginning of the next wave that is brewing, where we're like, hey, what we currently got isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to flip the script a little bit. And we've got to make this a place that is so accepting of everyone wherever they're at.
Mm-hmm.
We have to allow it to be a place where people can be open and honest and vulnerable. And we have to get shame abolished from the church as God intended.
Yeah.
And we've got to talk about mental health in church.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to talk about emotional health in church. And through teaching specifically men emotional health, we have to start healing families.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the wave that's coming. What I have to base this off of is just purely my own.
It's just, if you're paying
thought,
attention,
but
it's happening in some places.
I think it's starting to brew, and there are churches that are doing it. They're just like, you got to drive really far to get to them. Like I've found some in LA, but I'm like, oh, okay, that's way too far for us to go. But it's starting that it's like starting to boil.
Let's start one.
You want to start a church?
I'd be down. I think that a church, to me, in today's age, if I could design a church, and if anybody knows of a church like this in San Diego, let us know. I think I found one that wasn't too far, but a church that's a collective group of people who are trying to learn and grow together, but are also not enmeshed with one another. That's what people are craving. Because I think in our evolvement as humans, we're starting to get better at balancing where you end and I begin. So we're getting better at this interdependency. And we have a lot of people who are really codependent, who are completely enmeshed with each other. And so that means you need to believe what I believe. I can't hang out with you if you believe something different. I can't. So then there's no debate. There's no freedom in conversation. I'm not free to be me, because if I really express my opinion, you're just going to cast me out of the church or think I'm weird or whatever, instead of having a healthy conversation about it and agreeing to disagree at the end, or just giving up the small things.
Yeah, I think that brings me back a lot to our episode on politics.
Yeah.
And I think and it's often said, like, what do you not say at Thanksgiving table? Like, don't talk politics and religion. They kind of go hand in hand.
Here we are. We talked about politics and then sex and then faith.
Yeah, we're really on a rampage right now.
Yeah, we're handling all the tough topics.
Yeah, but the reason why we can't talk about those things is because people attach their identity to them so hard that if someone says something that differs from their belief, it's like you're questioning their identity. You're literally putting a crack in the foundation on which they've built their entire self-image and self-worth upon. So,
And that's triggering.
and that's so triggering for them. But that's, I don't think that that's what God intended for us to do, was to actually like build our identity upon these like rigid belief systems and structures and go and only find safety in being right. I think learning how to be safe without having all of the answers sends you on a quest to actually find him. And that was a lot of the lesson that I've learned, was because I used to be that. I held on so tightly to what I believed and was like, this is law, this is fact, and I'm never going to see any other way. And if someone had a difference in opinion, I wouldn't say out loud that I disagreed, but I would be like, oh, they're wrong. And like, I'm like, oh, I'd be like, that's really sad. They're probably going to go to hell. And like, that's truly where I used to be. But
you thought you were right and they were wrong.
100%. Yeah. And I was still, even when we met, I was more clenching my rightness than you were, where you were more like, I'm on a quest to figure out what I believe. I was like, nah, I know. I know. But in letting go of the certainty, I opened myself up to search for God, which is what he wants. He wants us to search for him. And in that searching, he reveals himself. And for me, it was in ways that were counter to what I was told where I would find him. Like, I never realized growing up. I always prayed, and my prayers are always like, God, could you please make sure that I like am able to get a good grade on this test, and that my friends are nice to me at school, and that you just put the wisdom in my mind to get good grades, like whatever it was, right? Like,
it's just like, it's a Christmas list.
I was literally Christmas listing him for years without realizing, oh wait, just be quiet, and he'll speak. Yeah. And I have heard God in just sitting on my meditation pillow vastly beyond when I was doing the prayers that I thought I was supposed to be doing. He revealed himself to me in such deeper, more intimate ways. And all of a sudden I felt far more, not all of a sudden, but like kind of like I felt so much more connected to him and not connected to Christianity, religion, labels, my rigid belief system. I was like, no, I'm just going to talk to God. And I don't really think he cares if I believe exactly the right things about what the Bible was trying to say and that I, debate them. Like, I think he wants me to just search, follow him, and kind of be like Jesus as much as I can. And like, that's what I feel called to do.
Yeah. I'm with you. Obviously we align pretty hard on our faith, I'd say, these days, but not because we convince each other or need to believe the same thing. We often just have these aha moments in meditation or just thoughts, and we'll share them with each other. And they just make sense. Like throughout our faith, of me trying to teach the Bible and have my faith buttoned up, my apologetics, tightly knit. Like I don't even remember half the apologetic type stuff that I used to believe or know, but I've read so many books. I didn't read a single book in high school that was given to me by a teacher. Not one. I never read any of the books. I've almost failed every class in high school. Throughout my years of high school, I'd be fake reading a book, and it would be the Bible or like Case for Faith, Case for Christ, like all these apologetic books. And I got so passionate about it. I just had my faith iron tight, and I've heard it described before, like mental gymnastics. And I picture myself at like 21 or 20, just having my faith so rigid and buttoned up that I knew exactly what to say in every conversation and what was what in the Bible, and this verse linked with this other verse to back it up, and how the Bible was squared iron tight. And I can feel God telling me now, like, hey, it's not your job to prove me. It's not like I'm big enough. Like, like let go of whether other people believe about what they believe about me. It doesn't matter. Like, what is it to you? It's like codependency almost. I had to have my faith so iron tight because what does it say about me if I'm doing all these things about my faith and it's not, and I can't justify it to others? You know, it's like, oh, I have to be so right. And I picture like somebody like me, you know, young in their faith, or just having all these mental gymnastics and scriptures iron tight, going to like Bali to evangelize, like on a missions trip, or going to, you know, India or something on a missions trip, and meeting someone who doesn't even really care if Jesus is real or not. Like, they're just not caught up in it, you know? They're helping people, poor people eat or something, like a Mother Teresa type person, right? Some spiritual teacher out over there and I'm like evangelizing, you got to believe in Jesus. And I could picture like somebody like that just looking at me and going like, I'll let Jesus tell me when I get to heaven whether I did a good job or not. I'm trying to help these people eat. You know, and I think like Jesus would say that. Like Jesus, like the things that Jesus said to people is like, sell everything you own. Like, it doesn't stop being a Pharisee trying to prove everything about God, and like the Pharisees did. If you're just trying to prove God and so that other people believe what you believe, like there's something else going on there. And I just think I got to a point where like I literally don't care anymore my theology. Because if let's say most of us end up getting dementia at some point anyway in our lives, when I die, I might not even have half a brain to even have my theology buttoned up anymore anyway. So at the end of the day, it really just comes down to faith and pursuing what you believe your calling is, and relying on God, and really just going, I'm going to let go of everyone's perception of me and do the thing I feel called to do, whether that means everyone thinks I'm crazy or not. And then God's like, yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted from you the whole time. To just trust me and just move. Like, don't try to prove me. Don't try to, I don't know. Maybe some people's calling is to try to prove that God is right, or God is real, or God is this, or God is that. I let God be God. If he wants to speak, he can speak. I don't need to speak for God unless God tells me something to say. I'd rather not speak for God than speak for God wrongly. So the only thing I'll say that God has ever told me is to just listen more. That's the only thing I'd ever say to somebody, like, listen more and love more.
I mean, to be honest, that's what God and I have in common.
You tell me to listen a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's true.
I was just kidding.
It is true. I wouldn't even go as far as to say you need to have any of your theology buttoned up at all. Like, just listen to whether you just want to say, dumb it all the way down to source. Like, you don't even have to say the word God. If you're because some people have religious trauma.
Yeah, I was thinking in my mind, actually, as you were speaking, we really need to hold space for that.
Yes.
And I'm thinking that people who have a lot of religious trauma probably turn the episode off by now, but
maybe not.
And maybe hopefully this is a refreshing take for them, but I just want to hold space because I've experienced it to some of a degree. I've been hurt by the church, and I know that there are people who've had it far worse. There's just so many ways that people have been traumatized by the church, and I just want to hold space for that. And
that's why I do believe we need to get back to the basics. And I believe that God, when I feel God speaking to me, is like just the basics. Love. How do you love one another? Like, if God is love, if you're to love God and love others, some of us don't know how. And some of it, like I didn't know how to love well growing up. I wasn't taught to love well. So if love is the mission, don't just start loving, because sometimes we do things for people that aren't loving that we think are loving. So like unsolicited advice is a big one. Somebody might give a ton of unsolicited advice to a coworker or a friend or a neighbor because they're like, well, I'm being loving, so I need to tell this person this thing. And it's like, that's no longer loving. You're now borderlining being abusive. They have a right to their autonomy, and you're inflicting that on them because you think you're right and they're wrong. So there's so many ways that we can attempt to love and that aren't correct. So learning how to love correctly is kind of the point of this whole podcast. To learn how to love yourself better, to learn how to love others better. And I'm a person that didn't know how, that has found some ways to do it better. And that's why I feel called to speak up about it, because I think a lot of us have these epiphanies or growth and we go, oh, cool, I have my life better now. My relationships are better. I'm parenting better. But we forget that a lot of people aren't taught this
right
from childhood.
Yeah, and I even think like we talk about this, and not so much on the mic, but more to each other, of this, like God called us to love. And where does that intersect with the inner work that we're doing? And that is when I show up defensive in our fights, I'm not loving you well. When I can get a little
Can
bit...
we record this? No, I'm just kidding.
We are recording this.
I'm kidding.
And like when I show up and I unknowingly am a little bit manipulative to get what I want, I'm not loving you well. When I get triggered and I respond in anger and I don't handle my reaction well, I'm not loving you well. And when I, get upset at the girls for something because it triggered me, I'm not loving them well. And so in order to do what God told us to do, which was to love each other, I have to do my work. So that is really a big part of why this work is a calling to me, is if I'm put on this earth to love and to love others and love them well, I have to do my work in order to be able to love them well, because there's so many ways I've given unsolicited advice and I've hurt people by it, not knowing. And so there's so many ways that we show up that is not loving, that we're not aware of. And I think that the call is actually a collective awakening of our awareness. God wants us to awaken, to become more aware of the ways that we are not loving those around us, and to work on it so that we're more loving, so that we can be more accepting. That's the call. At least that's my call.
Yeah, I love that. And I believe the same thing. And I think that the more we do that, we end up actually having a better life.
100%.
And it just comes back to you. It's hard. It's definitely hard, especially at first. But the more that you do it, it just comes back to you. If you show up well for your partner for a long time, they're going to start showing up well for you, or they're going to leave you.
Or you're going to leave them.
Yeah, like but just show up well for a long time and see what happens, and it is hard. I don't show up well all the time. I didn't show up that great last night. I get in moods. I get in moods. My feelings get the best of me sometimes. My energy gets the best of me. Sometimes I talk too much. Sometimes I rant too long. Sometimes I make my point too many times in 17 different ways. And that's where we're at. But, we just have to accept ourselves and grow. But I want to shift gears, like, so we talked about our story of faith, and then we talked about what we believe. And then, like, so are we Christians?
I don't know. I feel like we should just like do a little poll on Instagram and people can vote if we're Christians or not.
Yeah, they have to listen to the whole episode. I don't really want to ask that to everyone because I don't really
No,
care.
that was a joke.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't really care if people think I'm a Christian or not. I know deep down where I stand with God, and I don't think that it's on us to pull the plank out of our own eye before we pull the speck out of someone else's. I also think it's fine if you're not a Christian right now. I also think if you're in your journey and you grew up Christian and it was traumatizing for you and you're struggling over it, like that's where you're at right now. Like when we met and you were asking me, I told you this statement. I said, I'm still flying the plane. I haven't landed on the hill of my faith yet where I'm going to set up camp and stay there forever. And I actually never plan on that. I don't think the journey with God is to discover it. I think the journey with God is a wrestling. And if you read any story in the Bible, that's kind of the context of the whole thing is it's wrestling with God. It's facing adversity. It's stumbling in your faith and, fighting with God about this or that, and then coming back to him maybe. And it's like this journey of just faith that you believe that there's something bigger than you keeping us all afloat. And we have a calling and a mission to follow that inner voice. That's as simple as I can make my faith. I'm just on a journey as a human being with an inner voice that I believe is connected to the source. And I'm just going to keep following that inner voice. And I know for myself, when I've not followed that inner voice, my life goes bad. When I follow the inner voice, my life gets better. And that's as simple as I can make it.
Yeah, and this is like kind of a side tangent, but when we talk about that inner voice, I never quite realized until I started meditating more that why we close our eyes when we pray, when we meditate, is so that we don't look outside of us. We look inward because he is within us. And that is where we find him. And like learning how to sit in that silence and quiet my mind is when I learned to start hearing my intuition. And I do believe that God speaks through our intuitions.
Yeah. We have a segment if we want to introduce it.
Oh, yes.
Life hacks.
Life hacks. So each week we're going to share a life hack with you.
All of you life hacks.
And they're going to be whatever we come up with on the spot. So
I wrote one down though.
Oh, good, because I did not.
The ability to not compare yourself to others.
Is a life hack?
Yeah. Letting go of the other people's perceptions of you. And
So you decided to start the life hack segment with the hardest life hack?
Is it the hardest life hack?
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, it's
yeah,
so hard.
This is because I just listened to a podcast on how we compare ourselves. And I think these life hacks could be full episode topics anyway, but we'll just do them really briefly. This episode was about how when we're in social groups, we compare ourselves to others. So our brains, no matter where you're at, and it's obvious, we all know this, if you had what you had, but your social group was in another country that was really poor, you would feel rich. It's the only reason you feel poor or you feel like you don't have enough is because the people around you might have more. And the biggest life hack is to not listen to that voice and stop comparing. Just stop comparing. Chase your goals. Yes, chase the things you want to chase. Get better at the things you want to get better at, but not because you're trying to achieve some social success, because that bar is always going to move. And so if you're always chasing, you're never validating yourself. You're never giving yourself the win. You're winning races all the time. You're beating 99% of the population, possibly in wealth, in success, in relationship, like in any category. And you're not crediting yourself because you're chasing the people that are ahead of you. That's not bad. I chase people ahead of me all the time. I think striving for better is fine, but and wanting to up your game and wanting to grow is a good thing. Like, I don't want to be lazy and just stay the same, but the ability to just let go of the comparison game allows so much freedom in relationships and friendships. And like, I have a buddy who's doing a lot of the same things I'm doing, and he's killing it, and I'm not comparing myself to him. I'm rooting for him. And if his wins are my wins, and you start to just unlink this comparison game, is just the biggest life hack for your mental health and I get it. Yeah, it's insanely hard, but it's the number one life hack. And the way that I've done it is meditating, because you go inward and you just focus on your calling, your journey. And that has to do with your faith. Like, your journey isn't this person's journey. You're called to live in this country, in this state, in this city, and do this job. And the only thing that you have to check in on is, are you actually called to be doing the thing you're doing, or are you just doing it to run from your calling? And nobody else can even judge that or know that. So listen to your inner voice, follow your calling, stop comparing yourself to others, and man, it unlinks you from the game.
I love that. It's a great life hack.
What's yours?
We both had to have one?
Yeah.
Oh.
You have to share one.
No. We're going to do just one a week.
No, you have to have your own. These are mine.
Okay. So my life hack is, if you're, and this really only works for those in a family unit, but if you buy the red buffalo plaid Christmas jammies for the adults in the family, we don't grow. And then you can all you have to do is buy the kids the new buffalo plaid ones every year, because they're always growing. So you have to get them new Christmas jammies.
And they always make them.
Yeah, they always make that style. So you can always have matching Christmas jammies, but only have to buy them for the kids. So it saves you half the cost. That is my life hack.
I love it.
Yeah, it is a little bit hard to tell the years apart, like one year after another, because it's like always the same jammies, but it's also kind of cute to see like the progression, you know?
The photos have the date on them.
Yeah.
I need new ones though, because my pants are a little like off, like Walmart brand or like.
Well, that would defeat the like hack.
Well, like every once in a while, can I get like a new pair next year or something?
I'll consider that if you're a good boy.
Love you.
Love you too.